Well, good morning. My name's Michael. I'm one of the pastors here at Cedarbrook, and I love this message series, Every Day Matters. We've taken a look at some things that are part of our life because they matter, right? The things that we worry about, and how Jesus can enter into that and help lead us and guide us to where now that every day can matter every day, right? And then are also decisions, the decisions we make. There's thousands and thousands of decisions we make all the time. And how can Jesus enter into that to make those decisions matter every day? And then today, we get to go through, wait for it, waiting. That's right, waiting. Waiting is awful. I hate waiting. I really do. I don't like waiting at all. I don't like waiting in lines. I don't like waiting for someone to respond back to a text message that I sent them. I just don't like waiting at all. And yet it's part of everyday life, isn't it? We wait all the time for things. And when we wait for things, that's when these worries and these decisions are part of that whole process. It's like this thing that ties them all together. When we're worried about something, it's because we're in a time of waiting. We have decisions to make, and we're not sure which decision to make because we're sitting in this time of waiting. And waiting feels like wasted time to me. Like I could be doing something better than just sitting around waiting. Waiting can be hard even if you're waiting for something good, like a child or a grandchild to be born, like or starting a new job. Like you're still waiting, or waiting for the paycheck to hit. There's so many things that we wait for, and even when it's good, it can feel so frustrating. It can feel so long. It can feel almost oppressive and overwhelming while you wait. And then throw in something that you're waiting for and an outcome you're not sure about, or you're waiting as you receive some bad news and you're trying to figure out what is going to be next, like a bad diagnosis, bad test results. For my wife Amanda and I, that was us. That's when this whole waiting thing really kind of hit the wall for me. It was back in 2004, sometime before some of you were even born. But 2004, we were 2 years into our marriage. And Amanda's legs began to get full, like they started to swell to the point where she couldn't bend her knees. She just kind of waddled around like this. And they got so big that it was tender to touch. And so I lovingly called her Puffy. I'm not a good husband. But so she legs are swelling. So we're like, we got to do something. So we call the doctor's office to set up an appointment. We wait for that day to come, and then we sit in a waiting room. And then while we're waiting in the waiting room, we go to an exam room where we wait some more, all for the doctor to go like, I'm not sure, I think it's probably something with the kidneys. We're going to refer you to a kidney specialist, which was setting another date to wait for that date to come, to sit in another waiting room, to sit in another exam room and wait some more for that specialist to go, yeah, it's definitely something with your kidneys. Probably need to take a closer look. We need to do a kidney biopsy. They take a little piece of the kidney, right, and they examine it. So it's another appointment date that we need to wait for to come, and sitting in another waiting room, and then a prep room, and then having the biopsy done, then waiting for them to examine it and give us the test results, which we have to go back to the kidney specialist for. Waiting is awful, right? It's a horrible time. The whole time we just want to have some kind of answer. We just want to move forward with our life in some way. And as we sit in that specialist's office once again, she says, yep, you have 2 rare kidney diseases, and it's even more rare that they show up together. And so we're not really sure what to do. I need to talk with my colleagues and see what kind of plan we can put together for treatment, and we'll just see if it works. That's more waiting on an unknown variable that we don't know if even going through this regimen of a new diet and pills and things like that is even going to do anything. It's going to solve the problem. Waiting's horrible. And it was in this waiting that I discovered that I don't really wait well. I mean, at first it was fine because that's what I told everybody. Yeah, it's fine. It's good. I'm good. Everything's good, right? Kind of just deny that there's bad stuff because I'm like, yeah, it'll get worked out. It'll be fine. Like maybe that's you. When you're waiting for something, you just put on this positive attitude. But what you're doing is like you're pressing down anything that could be negative because you don't want to deal with it. You don't want to talk about it. Anybody it sits there and it festers. That's what it was doing to me. Or maybe when you're in a time of waiting, it feels like a loss of control. So you just want to grab onto something, right? You want to control what you can control. I've heard that many times. And that's not bad. Like sometimes all you can do is focus on just controlling what you control, except as the time for waiting gets longer and longer, you're no longer just trying to control what you can control. You just become controlling, right? You can't maintain that for very long. Or maybe as time goes on in this waiting and it's one thing after another, you kind of let loose and you start complaining about things. And you start grumbling about things. I'm not talking about what I should have done in those early days and sitting with a counselor or a good friend and just sitting with them and going like, you know what, I'm not okay. This is really hard. I'm not talking about that. That would be healthy. I'm talking about just complaining about every little thing. Nothing is ever good. You start grumbling and complaining and you become bitter. How do you wait? What do we do with this waiting? Is waiting just wasted time? Well, I learned something through my waiting. I'd love to share that with you. And it's really connected with the Bible because I've seen in the Bible there's tons of people that have to wait for things. It's like they're always waiting for something. And it's like God is in no hurry whatsoever. Right? And one family in particular, God invited them to come and leave their family and follow him to a place he's going to show them. And his name was Abram. Abram and his wife Sarah. And he asked them to come and follow him. And he promised them that they would be a big family. In fact, they would have so many descendants, they would become their own nation. The problem is they were really old. And sometimes they did okay with the waiting. They trusted God, and that was good. And other times they tried to control it with their own opinions and thoughts about things of what they could do. And it didn't go well. They started abusing people around them and being deceptive to people. But through all of that time, the years of waiting, God continued to work with them. And here's the interesting thing that I've discovered about that. Waiting is not wasted time with God. Not to him. Not to God. It's actually formative. It's actually a time to be shaped into something new, who God intended you to be from the beginning. That's exactly what happened with Abram and Sarah. You see it in their names being changed. They turned from Abram and Sarah to Abraham and Sarah, right? To them, they changed their names. It's a sign that something new has come from this waiting. Now, that's not the end of the story for them, as they have that promised child, Isaac, and then he has twin boys. And that promise of being many descendants of a whole nation gets passed on to each one down to the second, the youngest of the twins, named Jacob. Jacob is an interesting name as it means this heel grabber. It's an idiom of saying like he tricks people and deceives people, right, to get what he wants. And thinking that he wants that blessing that God has to give, he does that. He tries to control people and trick them to get and manipulate to get what he wants, that blessing. Eventually, he has a time where he wrestles with God, like literally, right? He wrestles with God, and his name gets changed because he becomes a new person. Through all that time of waiting to receive this blessing, he wrestles with God, and his name is changed from Jacob, that heel grabber, to Israel. God fights, right? And it's not just for him. All of his descendants will be known as Israel. Right? They get to become a whole different group of people, and they end up in this place called Egypt, and they're oppressed in slavery for 400 years. Talk about a long time to wait for someone to come and deliver them. But here's the cool thing, all right? You know how I love to nerd out about things? Well, we're going to nerd out because this is really cool to see how God shapes this group of people. So here's a little diagram of how this is laid out. So the first 5 books of the Bible are laid out there, right? Genesis, and then you've got Exodus, and then you've got Leviticus in the middle, Numbers, and then Deuteronomy, right? So Genesis and Deuteronomy on either side of this mountain. What's significant about this mountain? This is the mountain that God is going to bring this group of people to transform them and shape them into a new people. They're in Egypt in slavery, and he's going to bring them out. That's all they've ever known, the gods of Egypt and how to live their life as slaves. That's all they know, and he's going to form them into a new people. And we can see that at the beginning of Exodus, right? It leads up to the edge of that mountain. And if you notice in Numbers, there's the other edge of the mountain. So in between those times, they're sitting at this mountain for a year where God has come near to them. And he's very clear how they can now come near to him. A bunch of different rituals and sacrifices and ways. So he's just really clear of what he expects for them to come to him. Now, some things go good and some things go bad, right away. They're kind of sick of waiting for this guy named Moses that kind of delivered them there and brought them out. And he goes up on this mountain and they're just sick of waiting for him. And they're like, oh, we don't know what happened to him. So they created an image. Right? They'd start to control this whole thing. This God of the Bible, we don't know what he's like. We know the gods of Egypt. Let's make something like that because then we can control that. We know what that's like in their time of waiting. Big failure. But God's not interested. Right? It doesn't in their failure that it's going to end everything. It's not fatal to his plan. In fact, his plan is not dependent on human failure. He's going to make it succeed and continues to shape this group of people. Now, here's the important thing about this as we look at the landscape of this, is that there's a time where he's going to bring them into this land that he promised back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's going to do it. It starts happening in Numbers. He's going to bring them to the edge of that. And what happens is they get really afraid because they see that there's some people there that are really big and that God can't bring them into that. So he's going to bring them through a wandering process, waiting and wandering for 40 years in this desert because he's going to shape them at that time. One generation is going to pass away, and the next generation is going to be shaped through this time of waiting to go into that land. Now, this is really cool, but at the beginning right here at Exodus chapter 19, we hear what God is going to do, what kind of people he's going to shape this group of Israelites into. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like you to open up your Bible to Exodus chapter 19. Now, if you are not familiar or don't have a Bible, raise your hand. We'll get you a Bible. We'd love to have people have Bibles. You can keep it. And then if you're looking for something, thank you. We see your hand. Raise your hand nice and high. We'll get you a Bible. And then if you're not familiar with it, table of contents. It'll tell you where Exodus is in the Bible. I'll give you a page number, and then you're going to look for chapter, big number, 19. And then you're going to look for a smaller number that has a 3. It's a 3, right? Exodus 19:3. Okay? And this is going to tell us how God is going to shape this group of people. Now notice the change that happens here. Okay? There's a change that's going to happen right in this first verse. Exodus chapter 19, verse 3. Then Moses climbed the mountain to appear before God. The Lord called to him from the mountain and said, "Give these instructions to the family of Jacob. Announce it to the descendants of Israel." Did you see the change? Jacob to Israel, right? It's like this little verse is showing us that there's going to be a transformation happening, a shaping of this group of people from Jacob to Israel. Like God did it then, he's going to do it with this whole nation now. So what are they going to be like? What is he shaping them into? Verse 4. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians. You know how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me and keep my covenant, you will be my own special treasure from among all the peoples on earth. For all the earth belongs to me, and you will be my kingdom of priests, my holy nation. What kind of people is he shaping this nation into be? A nation of warriors? A nation of accountants? No, a nation of priests, right? His own special treasure, his own special possession. And they're going to be set apart from all other nations to do something specific. What do priests do? They're the ones that represent the people to God, and that they can communicate what God is doing back to the people. Yeah? They're helping people draw near to God as God is drawn near to them. That's their function. The whole group of people are to be like that. That's going to take some transformation, isn't it? And that's where they sit at the mountain, the foot of the mountain, for a year before they set out to go spy out this land. And then there's this downward spiral, and God's going to continue to shape them. He's going to take the next 40 years to shape them while they wait. Now think about this. There's a nation or a generation that they failed, and God's going to raise up the next generation to be the ones to go back into the land. They've got to wait 40 years for that to happen. But while they're waiting, they're being shaped so that they can be this kingdom of priests. Yeah? That's really cool to me. So this waiting is not wasted time with God. In fact, God uses our waiting to shape us. But how? How is God going to shape this group of people? They're going to have a lot of experiences in this time of waiting. Some good, they're going to win some battles, and they're going to do some good things, and some bad things, like grumbling and complaining and wanting to go back to Egypt, a place of slavery and genocide, because they're hungry. That's the reason. They think that there's better food back there than wandering around in the desert. And God's going to continue to show up to them, and he's going to give them this bread, this miraculous appearing of this stuff that gets all over it. It's called manna. Do you know what manna means in Hebrew? It's a Hebrew word. What is it? That's what it means. They don't even know what it is. They're like, what is it? Right? So they go out every day to collect this, what is it? And if they collect too much or they keep it over the next day, it gets rotten. So they're not. They have to follow God's instructions just as exactly the way he wants them. And it's all formulative. It's all to shape them. In fact, as we see in this waiting, it's revealing something about who they are, their character. That's exactly what God says he's doing in the waiting, how he shapes them. We're going to go to Deuteronomy now, Deuteronomy chapter 8. So if you're in Exodus, go right. Or go look at the table of contents. You'll see it there. You're going to see Leviticus, Numbers, and then Deuteronomy, which is a very funny word. Deuteronomy chapter 8, so the big number 8, and then verse 2. Here's what God is saying to this group of people. Remember how the Lord your God led you through the wilderness these 40 years, humbling you and testing you to prove your character and to find out whether or not you would obey his commands. This is that next generation. Their parents and stuff have died. And they now have the opportunity not to follow in that footsteps, not to follow their own thoughts and opinions about things, not their own choices, but to what God is going to say. He's humbling them. He's testing them. He's revealing something about their own character that needs to be addressed so they can be shaped into a kind of people, kingdom of priests. A kingdom of priests that do what? It goes on. Verse 3. Yes, God humbled you by letting you go hungry and then feeding you with manna, a food previously unknown to you and your ancestors. He did it to teach you that people do not live by bread alone. Rather, we live by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. That's the type of people that can be a kingdom of priests. They need to be shaped and molded into a people that will listen to what God has to say. They're not going to just put on a happy face and push down all the negative things. They're not going to be a people that are just trying to get control of their stuff because they don't know what's going on. They're not going to be people that are just going to be grumbling and complaining. They're going to be a group of people that has God reveal some of the bad things in their character, some of the good things in their character, continue to shape them into the people that are going to listen to every word that comes from him, not from their stomach. Do you see that? Not from their own opinions, not from their own desires, but from what God is instructing them to do. Will they do it? Will they do it? This is the type of people he's shaping them to be. That's what God is using the waiting for. It's for your waiting too. You're waiting. Whatever it is that you're waiting for, whatever you're waiting in, no matter how long your waiting is, it's an opportunity to be shaped into the person God intends you to be. In fact, Jesus is going to go through this very thing. You're going to see connections between what Jesus' story and this Old Testament story. You see the connections there. This Old Testament, I'll share this with you, and I want you to draw out that. See if you can see some of those things that connect back to the story, and see that Jesus is so grounded in who he is that he's going to listen to everything that comes from God. Now we're going to go to Matthew chapter 4. We're going to keep going right if you're in your text. Or this would be a really good time to look up in the table of contents to find the page number. Now this is going to be after Jesus has come on the scene and he has been baptized and he's come up out of the water. Now he's going to be led out into a wilderness. Check out and see if you can catch the different connections. Matthew chapter 4, verse 1. Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted there by the devil for 40 days and 40 nights. He fasted and he became hungry. Do you see the connections? In the wilderness, instead of 40 years, it's 40 days and 40 nights to be tested. He didn't eat anything, so he becomes hungry. Is he going to listen to his stomach? Is he going to listen to his own voice in his own head, or his own opinions, or the way he would do things? Is he going to try to just take control of things? Well, that's exactly what the devil's going to tempt him with, isn't it? You're hungry, so why don't you perform a miracle if you really are who you say you are? Verse 3. During that time, the devil came and said to Jesus, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become loaves of bread." But Jesus told him, "No, the scriptures say, people do not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." Jesus knows exactly the type of person God intends him to be. He's going to listen to every word that comes out of the mouth of God. Something that took 40 years for the Israelites to learn how to do that, even in their failings and even in their successes. For me, and maybe for you, it shows me how I can see waiting as an opportunity for God to shape me, to reveal some of the things in my character that aren't good. And that's exactly what he did in my waiting with my wife's kidney disease and all of that. As we were waiting these 4 years of waiting, in that time, there was a time where we became pregnant. Now, they told us not to do that, not to become pregnant because it's not going to end well. And so we were waiting for our child to, for their life not to end well. It was more waiting. And something that God revealed in me was that I just downplay my feelings about things. I become anticlimactic with things because if I am not too excited about it, I can't be disappointed. Right? I can't come from a high to a low. And so I had an opportunity that God speaks into me and wants to reveal that in me of what I could do. Now, we knew that the pregnancy would not end well, and it didn't end well. Our little Eloise died at 6 months in the womb. But for me, it was transformative in that I had an opportunity to be a joyous father, that there is life happening. However long it lasts, I wanted to be a father for that length of time. And I wanted to be excited about it. I wanted to experience that rather than downplay it and be like, oh, no, it's okay. But yet there's these horrible, yucky feelings deep down inside that aren't being addressed. I'm not sure how God is forming you. I'm not sure what he's trying to shape you and what kind of things are coming up in your own character in your time of waiting. All I know is that you can invite God into your waiting to show you what needs to be transformed, what needs to be shaped, which new life can come out of it, no matter how hard it is, no matter how oppressive or frustrating it feels. Like it feels like it could be crushing you, and yet there can be something new that comes out of this. You can be shaped into something you've never been before. You get to become this new creation. The way to do this is to invite God into it. Invite God into your waiting, whatever you're waiting on right now, good or bad. A simple way of praying and asking God to be a part of it. And I have a little prayer. In fact, it's so short that I'm going to repeat it 3 times and invite you into just praying it along with me. So let's just pray this prayer into your waiting so that you can be shaped into the person that God intended you to be. Here's the prayer. Jesus, make me whatever you want me to be. Jesus, make me whatever you want me to be. Jesus, make me whatever you want me to be.